Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be the guy pouring my heart out on Reddit, but here I am. My name is John, and I've been married to Sarah for 8 years. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and it felt like a whirlwind romance straight out of a movie. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I always believed we were solid. I thought our bond was unbreakable. Sarah and I built a pretty good life together. We both had decent jobs, bought a house in a nice neighborhood, and even adopted a dog named Max. Friends often commented on how happy we seemed, and to be honest, I thought we were too. But in hindsight, I now realize that the cracks were there all along, and I just didn't see them, or maybe I refused to. It started with the small things. Sarah became more distant and irritable. She'd snap at me for minor things and started working late more often. I brushed it off as stress from her job. Sarah works in marketing, and her company had just taken on a major new client, so late nights and early mornings seemed plausible. One night, I was cleaning up after dinner. Sarah had gone to bed early, complaining about a headache. As I was loading the dishwasher, her phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it out of habit, expecting to see a notification from one of her friends or a work email. Instead, it was a text from someone named Dave. It simply said, "Can't stop thinking about last night." My heart sank and a knot formed in my stomach. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I decided to ignore it and trust my wife. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe Dave was a coworker, and it was about work. But as days turned into weeks, more messages appeared, and not just from Dave. There was also a guy named Mike. The messages were becoming more frequent and explicit. Still, I didn't confront her right away. I know, I probably should have. But I kept telling myself that I needed more evidence, more proof before accusing my wife of something so terrible. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home, constantly on edge and doubting everything. The turning point came when I noticed Sarah had started hiding her phone. She would take it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She put a password on it, something she had never done before. The distance between us grew, both emotionally and physically. Sex became rare, and when it did happen, it felt mechanical, like she was just going through the motions. One night after she had fallen asleep, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was going on. So I waited until she was in a deep sleep, then gently took her phone from her side of the bed. My hands were shaking as I tried to unlock it, but I remembered the pattern from when I had seen her unlock it before. When the screen unlocked, my world crumbled. There were hundreds of messages, photos, and videos. She had been sexting with both Dave and Mike, sending them pictures and videos that left nothing to the imagination. The worst part, there was a video of her with both of them at the same time, filmed in our bedroom. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt nauseous, my heart pounding in my chest. I quickly put her phone back and stumbled into the living room, trying to process what I had just seen. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, unable to sleep, my mind racing with questions and anger. I knew I had to confront her, but I didn't know how. The next morning, as I watched her go through her usual routine, pretending everything was normal, I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this to me, to us? The confrontation was inevitable, but I needed to be prepared. I needed to understand why and how this happened. And so here I am, writing this post, seeking advice from strangers on the internet. I don't know what to do or how to move forward. All I know is that the woman I married is not the woman I thought she was, and my life will never be the same. The day after discovering the messages and video on Sarah's phone, I felt like a ghost walking through my own life. Everything felt surreal, as if I was watching a movie of someone else's misery. Sarah seemed blissfully unaware of my internal turmoil, which only added to my frustration and anger. I couldn't understand how she could act so normal after what she'd done. I went to work that morning, but I was barely functional. My mind kept replaying the images and conversations I had seen on her phone. My productivity plummeted, and my coworkers noticed something was off. When my friend and colleague Tom asked if I was okay, I almost broke down right there. I just told him I had a rough night and left it at that. By lunchtime, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know more, I left work early, telling my boss I wasn't feeling well. When I got home, I started piecing together the timeline of her infidelity. I checked her emails, social media accounts, and our shared calendar. The more I looked, the more I found. It wasn't just Dave and Mike. There were others too, all with similar patterns of communication. The realization that this wasn't just a one-time mistake, but a series of deliberate choices, shattered me even more. It became clear that Sarah had been living a double life, using every opportunity to betray me. The betrayal felt like a physical weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. That evening, I decided to check our home computer. Sarah had her own laptop, but she often used the shared desktop for certain things. I found her browsing history filled with searches that hinted at her affairs. There were visits to hotel booking sites, online chat forums for cheaters, and explicit dating apps. She had even looked up articles on how to keep an affair hidden from a spouse. As I scrolled through the history, my anger grew. I felt like a detective uncovering a criminal's trail, except this criminal was my wife. Every new piece of evidence was another dagger in my heart. I saved copies of everything, partly to confront her with the undeniable proof, and partly to protect myself if things got ugly. One day, I decided to follow her. She had told me she was going out with friends from work, so I waited until she left and then discreetly tailed her. My hands were shaking, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I felt like a character in a bad spy movie. She drove to a hotel on the outskirts of town, a place she had no reason to be if she was just meeting coworkers for a drink. I parked a few spots away and watched as she entered the hotel lobby. After a few minutes, I saw her meet up with a man I didn't recognize. They embraced like lovers and then headed to the elevator. My stomach churned. I took a few pictures with my phone as evidence, feeling like the biggest creep in the world, but I had to know the truth. After about an hour, they emerged from the elevator looking disheveled and satisfied. They exchanged a kiss before parting ways. I followed Sarah back home, every mile filled with a growing sense of dread. When she walked through the door, she acted as if nothing had happened, greeting me with a casual, "Hey, how was your day?" I wanted to scream at her, to unleash all the hurt and anger I was feeling, but I couldn't. I needed a plan. I needed to confront her when I was calm and had all the evidence laid out. So I played along, pretending everything was fine while my insides were in turmoil. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the events of the day, the images of her with another man, and the casual way she lied to me. The next morning, I decided it was time to confront her. I couldn't keep living in this hellish limbo. I needed answers, and I needed to hear them from her own lips. The confrontation was going to happen, and I had no idea how it would go. Would she deny everything, even with the overwhelming evidence? Would she try to turn it around on me somehow? Or would she finally come clean? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I knew today was the day I had to confront Sarah. I couldn't keep living like this, pretending everything was fine while my world was falling apart. I waited until she was up and we were both sitting in the kitchen, having our morning coffee. She looked so normal, so innocent, and it made my blood boil. "Sarah," I started, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk." She glanced up from her phone, her face a mix of curiosity and mild irritation. "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I know about Dave and Mike. I know about the others too. I know you've been cheating on me." Her face went pale, and for a moment she looked genuinely shocked. But then her expression hardened. "What are you talking about, John? I don't know what you've convinced yourself of, but this is ridiculous." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I had saved all the evidence. "I found your texts, your emails, the photos, the videos. I saw everything, Sarah. There's no denying it." She looked at the screen, her eyes widening as she saw the incriminating evidence. For a moment I thought she might break down and confess, but instead she went on the defensive. "You went through my phone? My emails? How could you invade my privacy like that?" Her audacity left me speechless. "Invade your privacy? You've been screwing other men in our bed, Sarah. How could you do this to me? To us?" She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms defensively. "Oh, come on, John. Our marriage has been dead for years. You know that. You barely pay attention to me anymore. Maybe if you were more of a husband, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." Her words cut deep, but I wasn't about to let her twist this around. "That's bullshit, Sarah, and you know it. We've had our problems, sure, but cheating is not the solution. You've betrayed me in the worst possible way." She stood up, her face contorted with anger. "Oh, get off your high horse, John. You're not perfect either. You think I don't know about the flirting with that woman at your office? The late nights working? Don't act like you're some saint." I was taken aback. "Flirting? I've never cheated on you, Sarah. I've never even thought about it. And those late nights? They were for us trying to build a better future. But clearly you were too busy screwing around to notice." She scoffed, shaking her head. "Whatever. You're just upset because I got caught. You want to play the victim, fine. But don't pretend you're blameless." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like she had no remorse, no guilt, just pure defiance and blame shifting. "This isn't about me, Sarah. This is about you and your choices. I want to know why. Why did you do it?" She sighed, finally sitting back down. For a moment I saw a flicker of the woman I married, the one who used to care about us. "I don't know, John. I guess I felt empty, unfulfilled. I needed excitement, passion, and I didn't find it with you anymore." Her words were like daggers, each one stabbing deeper than the last. "So you decided to find it with other men and film it? In our bed?" She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry, John, I really am. I didn't mean for it to get this far. It just happened." I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "Things like this don't just happen, Sarah. You made a choice, multiple choices, and now we're here." There was a long silence, the weight of everything hanging in the air. I didn't know what to say, and it seemed like she didn't either. Finally, she spoke. "What do you want to do now?" I'd been thinking about this question for weeks, but now that it was here, I still didn't have a clear answer. "I don't know, Sarah. I honestly don't know. But I can't keep living like this. We need to figure out where we go from here." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand. I'm sorry, John. I really am." Her tears didn't move me. Not this time. The damage was done and it was deep. I stood up, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. "I need some time to think. I'll stay at Tom's for a few days. We'll talk more when I get back." As I packed a bag and walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. My life would never be the same again. Leaving the house that day felt like stepping into a new reality. Every step away from the life I thought I knew amplified the weight on my shoulders. I drove to Tom's place, my mind racing with the whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal. They all mixed together, leaving me exhausted before I even reached my destination. Tom, being the good friend he is, welcomed me with open arms and a concerned expression. He didn't press me for details, just offered a cold beer and a place to crash. I appreciated his silent support more than words could express. As I settled onto his couch, the enormity of what had happened began to sink in even more. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sarah, about the life we built together and how it all crumbled in an instant. Memories of our happiest moments played in my mind like a cruel highlight reel. Our wedding day, the vacations, the lazy Sundays spent in each other's company. How had it come to this? How had we drifted so far apart without me noticing? The anger was the hardest to deal with. I was furious at Sarah for betraying me, for shattering the trust we had. But there was also a part of me that was angry at myself. Had I been so blind, so complacent? The self-doubt gnawed at me, making me question every decision, every moment we had shared. Over the next few days, Tom gave me the space I needed while also being there when I needed to talk. He listened as I poured out my frustrations, my hurt, my confusion. I recounted every detail, from the first suspicious text to the damning video. Saying it all out loud made it feel more real, more definitive. Tom, ever the voice of reason, helped me see things from different perspectives. "John, you can't blame yourself for her choices," he said one evening as we sat on his porch. Yes, maybe there were problems in your marriage, but cheating is never the answer. She had other options: counseling, talking to you, even separating if she was that unhappy. What she did was a conscious choice to hurt you. His words were a balm to my wounded pride. I knew he was right, but accepting it was another thing entirely. The nights were the hardest. Lying awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind would wander to dark places. I imagined Sarah with Dave, with Mike, laughing, sharing intimate moments that were supposed to be ours. The jealousy and anger were suffocating. One night, about a week after I had left home, I decided to go for a drive. The open road helped clear my head, and I ended up at a park Sarah and I used to visit. I sat on a bench staring at the lake, and let the memories wash over me. The good, the bad, everything. I realized that as much as I loved Sarah, the woman she had become was not the woman I married. Acceptance began to creep in, slowly but surely. The initial shock and anger were giving way to a deep, pervasive sadness. I grieved for the life I thought I had, for the future I envisioned. It felt like mourning a loved one, the stages of grief playing out in real time. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and eventually, acceptance. As the days passed, I started thinking about the practicalities. What did I want? Could our marriage be salvaged, or was it beyond repair? The thought of forgiving Sarah seemed impossible, but the idea of moving on without her was equally daunting. I knew I needed to confront her again, to have a real conversation about what happened and what we both wanted. Returning to Tom's place, I made a decision. I would go back home and talk to Sarah, but this time, it wouldn't be about accusations and defenses. It would be about understanding what went wrong and whether there was any hope for us. I needed closure, one way or another. The day I went back home, I felt a strange sense of calm. The storm inside me had subsided, leaving a clear path forward. As I walked through the door, Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, looking more haggard than I had ever seen her. Her eyes were red and puffy, a sign that she had been crying. "John," she said softly, standing up. "I'm glad you're back. Can we talk?" I nodded, taking a seat opposite her. "Yes, Sarah, we need to talk. About everything." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our situation hanging heavy in the air. I could see the regret in her eyes, but I needed more than regret. I needed answers, and I needed to decide what my next steps would be. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this. Or maybe we would finally accept that our journey together had come to an end. Either way, I knew I had to face it head on, with an open heart and a clear mind. "Tell me everything, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "I need to understand how we got here." And so she began to talk, and I listened, ready to face whatever came next. Sarah took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them on the table. "John, I know I've hurt you more than I can ever explain, and I'm not going to sit here and make excuses. But I need you to understand how I felt, why I did what I did." I nodded, my expression unreadable. "Go on, Sarah." She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "A few years ago, I started feeling disconnected. It's not your fault entirely, but I felt like we were drifting apart. We stopped communicating, stopped being intimate in the ways we used to be. I felt lonely, John. Desperately lonely." I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep my emotions in check. "And you didn't think to talk to me about it? To tell me how you were feeling?" She looked down, tears streaming down her face. "I did, John, but every time I tried, it felt like you weren't really listening. You'd brush it off, tell me I was overreacting or that we'd deal with it later, but later never came." Her words stung because deep down, I knew there was some truth to them. I had been guilty of neglecting our relationship, of taking her for granted, but that still didn't justify what she had done. "So instead of trying harder, you decided to cheat on me, with multiple men, and film it?" Sarah wiped her tears, her voice cracking. "It started with Dave. He was a friend from work who seemed to understand me. We'd talk for hours, and I felt alive again. One night after too many drinks, we kissed and things escalated from there. I knew it was wrong, but it felt so good to be desired, to feel wanted. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. And Mike? And the others? Once I crossed that line, it became easier to justify the other affairs, she admitted, her voice shaking. Mike was another co-worker, and the others were men I met online. It was like an addiction, John, a way to fill the void I felt inside. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like she was describing someone else, not the woman I thought I knew. And the video, in our bed? She looked even more ashamed. That was a mistake, a drunken, stupid mistake. Dave and Mike came over one night when you were away on a business trip. We were all drunk and one thing led to another. Filming it seemed like a fun idea at the time, but it's something I deeply regret now. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Sarah, do you have any idea how much you've hurt me, how much you've destroyed? She nodded, her face a mask of sorrow. I know, John, and I'm so sorry. If I could take it all back, I would, but I can't. All I can do is ask for your forgiveness and hope we can find a way to move forward. Her apology felt hollow, like it wasn't enough to mend the shattered pieces of my heart. But I knew I had to make a decision. Sarah, I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if we can ever go back to what we had, but I'm willing to try, for the sake of what we once meant to each other. Her eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope. Thank you, John. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I sighed, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. We need to go to counseling, together and individually. We need to rebuild our trust, and that's going to take time and effort from both of us. She nodded eagerly. Yes, of course, I'll do anything. I just want to fix this, John. We agreed to start therapy immediately, and I moved back into the house, though I slept in the guest room. It was awkward and uncomfortable, but it was a step towards healing. We attended counseling sessions twice a week, and I began to see a therapist on my own as well. The first few sessions were tough. We had to face the raw, painful truths about our marriage and our individual shortcomings. Sarah opened up about her feelings of loneliness and inadequacy, while I acknowledged my role in neglecting our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were many tears and heated arguments, but we slowly began to understand each other's perspectives. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, Sarah approached me in the kitchen. John, can we talk? I nodded, setting down my cup of tea. Sure, what's on your mind? She took a deep breath. I've been thinking a lot about what our therapist said, about rebuilding trust, and I realized I need to be completely honest with you about everything, even if it hurts. I braced myself, unsure of what was coming next. Go on. There's one more thing I need to tell you, she said, her voice trembling. Before the affair started, I had an abortion. I was pregnant, and I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure if it was yours or Dave's. I was scared and confused, and I made the decision on my own. Her confession hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Why didn't you tell me, Sarah? Why didn't you give me a chance to be there for you? She sobbed, tears streaming down her face. I was ashamed, John. I felt like I had already betrayed you, and I didn't know how to face you. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to say. The pain and betrayal I felt were overwhelming. But I also realized that this was part of the process. If we were going to move forward, we needed to confront everything, no matter how painful. Sarah, I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you for all of this, but I'm willing to try. We need to keep talking, keep being honest with each other. She nodded, wiping her tears. I promise, John. No more secrets, no more lies. As the weeks turned into months, we continued our therapy and worked on rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to give up. But slowly, I began to see glimpses of the woman I fell in love with. We started spending more time together, rediscovering the things that brought us joy. It wasn't a perfect process, and there were setbacks, but we were making progress. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah reached for my hand. John, thank you for giving us a chance. I know it's not easy, but I believe we can get through this. I squeezed her hand, feeling a glimmer of hope. I believe that too, Sarah. But we need to keep working at it every day. She nodded, her eyes filled with determination. We will, John. We will. And so we continued our journey, step by step, toward healing and rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. It was a long road, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we had a chance to find our way back to each other, stronger and more connected than before. The first few months were a roller coaster of emotions. Some days were filled with hope and tentative steps towards rebuilding trust, while others were marred by anger and resentment. The journey was far from easy, and the scars of betrayal lingered. Our therapy sessions became a crucial part of our routine. They provided a safe space to air our grievances and work through the deep-seated issues that had plagued our marriage. Our therapist, Dr. Collins, was a godsend. She had a way of cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of the matter. John, you need to express your feelings openly, Dr. Collins said during one session. Bottling up your emotions will only lead to more resentment. I nodded, taking a deep breath. It's just hard, you know? Every time I look at her, I see them. I see what she did. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I know, John, and I'm so sorry. I wish I could erase it all. Dr. Collins interjected gently. Sarah, while you can't change the past, you can show John that you're committed to making amends and rebuilding trust. It's going to take time and consistent effort from both of you. Outside of therapy, Sarah and I started to engage in activities that once brought us joy. We went hiking, something we used to love but had neglected over the years. We cooked meals together, rediscovering the simple pleasures of each other's company. These moments, however small, were steps towards mending our fractured relationship. One evening we decided to go through old photo albums. As we flipped through the pages, reminiscing about our early years together, I felt a pang of nostalgia. There were pictures of our college days, our wedding, vacations, and countless candid moments that captured our love and happiness. Look at this one, Sarah said, pointing to a photo of us laughing on a beach. We were so carefree back then. I smiled sadly. Yeah, we were. We had no idea what life would throw at us. Sarah placed her hand on mine. John, I want us to get back to that. Maybe not exactly the same, but I want us to find happiness together again. Her sincerity touched me, but I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. It's not going to be easy, Sarah, but I'm willing to try. We also had to address the practical aspects of our relationship. Finances, living arrangements, and even intimacy all needed to be renegotiated and rebuilt. We agreed on a transparent approach to our finances, something we had taken for granted before. Sarah showed me her accounts, and we set up a joint budgeting plan to ensure we were both on the same page. Intimacy was a more delicate issue. The physical aspect of our relationship had been deeply affected by the betrayal. Dr. Collins suggested we take it slow and focus on rebuilding emotional intimacy first. We followed her advice, spending more time talking, holding hands, and sharing our thoughts and fears. One night, as we lay in bed, Sarah turned to me. John, I want you to know that I'm committed to us. I'm going to do everything I can to make things right. I looked into her eyes, seeing the earnestness in her expression. I know, Sarah, and I'm trying too. We just need to keep taking it one day at a time. Our progress wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments when the pain resurfaced with a vengeance. Arguments would erupt over seemingly trivial things, but they were always rooted in the deeper hurt and mistrust. Each time we had to remind ourselves of our commitment to work through it together. One such moment happened during a dinner with friends. The conversation turned to relationships and fidelity, and I felt a surge of anger and humiliation. Sarah noticed my tension and gently squeezed my hand under the table, offering silent support. Later that night, we talked about it. I'm sorry that happened, John, Sarah said, her voice filled with regret. I know it's still hard for you. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. It's just, those reminders, they're everywhere. It's like I can't escape it. She nodded. I understand, and I'm here to face them with you, whatever it takes. Gradually, as months turned into a year, the intensity of the pain began to dull. It didn't disappear, but it became more manageable. We had established new patterns and routines, creating a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. One day, Sarah suggested we take a trip, just the two of us. "We need to get away from everything, John. A chance to reconnect without the daily stress." I was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. We chose a quiet cabin by a lake, a place where we could be alone and focus on each other. The trip turned out to be a turning point. Away from the reminders of our everyday life, we found a space to breathe and heal. We spent our days hiking, fishing, and talking. At night, we sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets, sharing our hopes and fears. It was a time of renewal, a chance to remember why we fell in love in the first place. As we sat by the lake on our last day, Sarah turned to me. "John, I love you. I know I've hurt you deeply, but I want you to know that I'm committed to our future." I took her hand, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. "I love you too, Sarah. We've been through hell, but I believe we can make it through this. Together." We returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. The road to recovery was still long, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We had faced the darkest parts of our relationship and emerged on the other side, battered but still standing. In the months that followed, we continued our therapy and worked on our relationship daily. There were still challenges, but we faced them together, with honesty and commitment. Our bond, once shattered, was slowly being rebuilt, stronger and more resilient than before. Reflecting on our journey, I realized that while the pain of betrayal would never fully disappear, it had taught me valuable lessons about love, forgiveness, and resilience. Our marriage was not the same as it once was, but in many ways, it was deeper and more authentic. And so we moved forward, one day at a time, hopeful for the future, and grateful for the second chance we had given each other. As the weeks and months passed, Sarah and I continued to navigate the rocky path of recovery. Our dedication to each other and to our therapy sessions played a significant role in our progress. Dr. Collins helped us develop communication skills and rebuild the emotional intimacy that had been shattered. One evening, after a particularly reflective therapy session, Sarah and I decided to take a walk in our neighborhood. It was something we used to do regularly, but had neglected in the chaos of recent events. The cool evening air felt refreshing, and as we walked hand in hand, we talked about our future. "John," Sarah began, her voice soft but determined, "I know we've been through so much, and there's still a long way to go. But I truly believe we can come out of this stronger than ever." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "I believe that too, Sarah. We've faced the worst, and we're still here, still fighting for us. That's something to be proud of." Our walks became a regular ritual, a time to reconnect and reflect. We began to rediscover the small joys in life, the things that had initially brought us together. It was a slow process, but with each passing day, the trust and bond between us grew stronger. One pivotal moment came when Sarah suggested we renew our wedding vows. "I want to make new promises to you, John," she said, tears in her eyes. "I want to commit to our future, to the life we're rebuilding together." Her proposal touched me deeply. Renewing our vows felt like a symbolic fresh start, a way to leave the past behind and look forward to a future filled with hope and love. We decided to hold a small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family. On the day of our vow renewal, standing in front of Sarah, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that had been missing for a long time. As we exchanged vows, I saw the genuine love and commitment in her eyes. We promised to support each other, to communicate openly, and to cherish the love we had rebuilt. After the ceremony, as we celebrated with our loved ones, I realized how far we had come. The pain and betrayal that once threatened to tear us apart had transformed into a foundation for a stronger, more resilient relationship. In the months following our vow renewal, we continued to work on our marriage. We set aside regular time for date nights, went on weekend getaways, and made a conscious effort to be more present and attentive to each other's needs. Our therapy sessions became less frequent but remained an essential part of our journey. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, Sarah turned to me with a smile. "John, I'm so grateful for the second chance we've given each other. I know it hasn't been easy, but I truly believe we're stronger now." I squeezed her hand, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "I agree, Sarah. We've been through hell, but we've come out the other side, and I think we're better for it. Our journey was far from perfect, but it was ours. We had faced the darkest moments of our relationship and emerged stronger, more connected, and more in love than ever. The lessons we learned about communication, trust, and resilience would stay with us forever." As I reflected on our journey, I realized that forgiveness and healing are not linear processes. They require patience, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to growth. Sarah's betrayal had tested the limits of our love, but it also revealed the strength and depth of our bond. In the end, our story was one of redemption and renewal. It was a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the human capacity to overcome even the deepest wounds. Sarah and I had rebuilt our marriage on a foundation of honesty, trust, and a shared commitment to our future. As we sat together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Our journey had been arduous, but it had brought us to a place of harmony and peace, and for that, I would be forever thankful. In the quiet moments, as we held each other close, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our love, tested and tempered by adversity, was stronger than ever, and that, in itself, was a beautiful thing. As I close this chapter of our story, I want to offer a piece of advice to anyone going through a similar experience. Healing is possible. It takes time, effort, and a willingness to face the pain head-on. But with love, patience, and dedication, even the deepest wounds can heal. Thank you for listening to our story. May it offer hope and inspiration to those who need it most.
Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions in the comments.